bombshell, ladies and gentlemen. A big bombshell just got released, according to Judge Napatino. Napatino. Uh, Big bombshell from Professor Jeffery Sachs. COVID came from the University of North Carolina. What? Wow, whoever thought North Carolina would have so many wet markets? Well, here's the big bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, and it may or may not shock you, depending on how much you already know about this, but take a look.
I'll tell you a sad truth, also a little surprising. And I have to admit, what I'm about to tell you is only 99% sure. But my view, based on very extensive work over the last 4.5 years, is that COVID came from the University of North Carolina, which is the leading researcher on beta coronaviruses, working with the U.S. government on a set of grant proposals that identified putting in the viral change that created SARS-CoV-2. It's a grim truth. It's ugly. It's been hidden from view. The reason I mention it in this context is we don't have any global governance that is effective right now to control the manipulation of dangerous pathogens like the manipulation that created the pandemic. And when it happened, and officially it took 7 million deaths, but probably if you count all of the deaths associated with COVID, it was probably closer to 20 million deaths. Even when that happens, it's never properly investigated. It's covered up.
So that is big details, ladies and gentlemen, that the University of North Carolina, which we know they have a biolaboratory, and the University of North Carolina, much like Anthony Fauci, are also contractors for the Pentagon. So, suspiciously, there was investigations on whether or not this SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus, came from one of the biolaboratories within the United States. We uncovered that there was biolaboratories in Wuhan. We know that it came from a lab. We know that it was man-made. It did not come from a wet market. It didn't transmit through bats, through someone buying from a wet market, but indeed came from a manufactured event in a laboratory that spread it like wildfire to other people as a way, as a weapon to go against populations, to control them, to manipulate them. And now we are uncovering that it's not China, it's actually the United States. That the United States was doing bioweaponry involved with beta coronaviruses and released this pathogen to the United States and to North America and other countries as a whole as a global-wide bioweapon to mass control a population. And as you said there, no one's being held to account. There's no global governance because the global governance is all captured by big pharmaceuticals, including the UN. You think the UN is the most powerful agency right now in the world because of its global governance to make sure countries don't break international laws. But when you have pharmaceuticals making trillions of dollars off of your health and subjugating countries into mass mandates, there is no power to hold them accountable. That these criminal cartels can get away with anything, including this coronavirus pandemic. And now we're finding out that it was manufactured in North Carolina, which again is partnered with DARPA. Same with Anthony Fauci. They're partnered by DARPA, which is a cutout of the military within the Pentagon. Why would the military and the Pentagon be working with a scientist and a bio research facility to make a coronavirus? Why would they be interested in doing that? To massively deceive people, to create a pathogen so that it could control a population. It could control a population and exterminate people that don't survive. Which Jeffrey Sachs is saying it's roughly 20 million. I'd say it's even higher than that, because we don't even know the official death count, because they also lie about the deaths. They keep telling you it's SADS, it's sudden adult death syndrome. You can't investigate if it's COVID or not. It's sudden death. So we don't even know for sure the exact count because of how much manipulation goes through every single level of authority, every single level that big pharmaceuticals have captured. They have captured governments, the media, everything in their control. And this is not even Jeffrey Sachs saying this, but this is the former CDC. The former CDC director, Robert Redford, also made that same argument. And this is before Jeffrey Sachs. Trump's former CDC director makes bombshell COVID claim that there's a real possibility the virus is born in North Carolina. There's a real possibility that the military, along with DARPA, along with Anthony Fauci, who has lied his entire life, his entire career, is nothing more than a lie. He's a serial liar. Look at how much damage he did during the AIDS epidemic that he contributed to. And people were angry at him, ferociously angry at him. But now people adore him. They still think of him as a hero. Anthony Fauci. They still think of him as a hero. Disney Plus did a documentary on him, for God's sakes. But we know, uncovering this information, looking into things, doing your own research, that this was manufactured and that they lied to you at every point in turn to massively deceive a population into this mandate for complete control of humanity. That's what they did. That's what they did. So here, this is from the Carolina Journal. It says the former director of the Centers for Disease Control has made a direct accusation that COVID-19 had started in a laboratory at UNC-Chapel Hill by one of its researchers and not a lab in Wuhan, China. Dr. Robert Redfield made the claim on the Third Opinion podcast late last week. He said the virus was intentionally engineered as part of a biodefense program and that the United States' role in it was substantial. When you look at the accountability for China, their accountability is not in the lab work and the creation of the virus, he told the podcaster. Their accountability is not the following the international health regulations after they realize that they have a problem and allowing people like me at the CDC to come in and to help them within 48 hours like they were obligated to based on that treaty. The treaty funded the research, both the NIH and the State Department, USAID, and the Defense Department. All four of these agencies help funded this research. So all four of these agencies, the National Institute of Health, the NIH, the USAID, and the Defense Department, all helped create a biological weapon, a pathogen, to infect a population. Of course they would do something like this. Of course they would. He went on to say that the scientific mastermind behind the research is Dr. Ralph Barrick at UNC Chapel Hill, who he says was very involved in this research. I think he probably helped create some of the original viral lines, but I can't prove that. But he was very involved, Redfield said. I think there is a real possibility that the virus birthplace was Chapel Hill. Redfield, the CDC director under former and President-elect Donald Trump, had originally supported the idea that the virus came from a lab leak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Remember that? Remember that? That was a crazy conspiracy theorist. Crazy. So crazy that Jon Stewart had to be shushed down by Stephen Colbert. Well, now it looks like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert look like idiots because it didn't actually come from China. It came from us. Well, it looks like America can make things after all. They can't make VCRs or CD players or something more relevant. Not things from the 90s. They can't make an electric vehicle for more than, $50,000, but hey, we can make a deadly pathogen and kill our a quarter of our population. How about that? Barrick has been researching coronaviruses for 3 decades and has authored hundreds of papers. He received the UNC Systems 2021 Oliver Max Garner Award, which recognizes faculty who have made the greatest contribution to the welfare of the human race. The welfare of the human race. When suicides and or I shouldn't say it, self-deletion and mental illness and obesity and everything went up during the pandemic, you were told to lock yourselves down. Children were further behind in education because they couldn't get one-on-one help from their teachers because they were told to do it online. Yeah, it's such a great contribution to the welfare of humanity. The award, named for the former North Carolina governor Max Gardner, is the highest honor the UNC system confers on faculty. At the time, UNC Board of Governors Chairman Randy Ramsey said Dr. Barrick has provided life-saving coronavirus treatment options for the people of our state, our nation, and the world. And I can assure you it wasn't ivermectin. I can assure you it wasn't the Nobel-winning prize medicine that is so advanced and so positive that they were trying to treat people with cancer with ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, and any of those. But no, we're gonna create a pathogen so that it mass infects people, lock them up like prisoners, and hope for the best. But rumblings of Barrick's possible involvement in the virus's creation have been circulating almost since its known beginning. In 2020, Carrie Debnick, a professor at Bowie State University, received a death threat for a rumor that she helped create the virus in Barrick's lab while she was pursuing her doctorate at UNC. She said that the information was false. Barrick was named in different conspiracy theories after a 2015 paper he co-authored with many other scientists, included one associated with the Wuhan lab, which showed that coronaviruses in bats could directly infect humans rather than involving in another animal. The first theory that emerged about the origins of COVID-19 was that it first appeared in a bat from a wet market in China. You mean the manufactured story, the cover-up? The pathetic cover-up that you don't need a science degree to know that it was completely false? That didn't come from a wet market, didn't come from a random bat? That there had to be some sort of manufactured element to this? And considering the fact that Wuhan, China, had a laboratory named after the disease. The disease is named after the laboratory. People were very aware that story was not going to be held up. The cover story was completely fabricated. That was one of the biggest lies at the start. In 2021, Barrick signed on to an open letter that appeared in Science demanding investigation into the origins of COVID-19. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the United States, has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create super viruses. for the good of humanity. We got to create super viruses with China and the Pentagon for the good of humanity. The good of humanity. This gain of function research has been funded by the NIH. The implications was clear. Intentionally or unwittingly, Eric was complicit in the creation of SARS-CoV-2, notwithstanding the total lack of evidence. Soon after, Ralph Barrick, gain of function, became a popular online search phrase and included online threats, according to Time.com. He later told MIT Technology Review, "We never create a super virus. That's a figment of Paul's imagination and obviously being used for political advancement." Of course not. Of course not. We're not creating super viruses using gain of function research. What are you talking about? This is not the gain of function you're looking for. So, this guy, Robert Barrick, and other scientists helped create, using funding from the NIH, which is Anthony Fauci, the Pentagon, and other agitators inside these organizations, and I'm sure Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation also plays a factor into this. They helped orchestrated the creation of the super virus within the United States. That's what we're seeing here. And even when the Carolina Journal tries to tiptoe around this, because they can't be upfront honest about it, because otherwise big pharmaceuticals are going to clamp down on them and they're going to lose their advertising. So they still got to push that narrative of, well, we don't really know for sure, and it seems all conspiracy. But we know that this guy worked in North Carolina, was at Chapel Hill at the time, was working on deadly pathogens, and was working on a coronavirus. That we can tell you, but we can't tell you that, oh, he actually created COVID-19. And even more so, Anthony Fauci even admitted to this. What? Anthony Fauci, the super liar, actually admitted to something? Well, in this case, when he was asked by Rand Paul in his Senate committee here, where Anthony Fauci notoriously lied, he lied purposely, under oath to the nation numerous times. But he did reveal a little truth in the fact that Dr. Barrick was doing gain of function research in North Carolina. So here, it says here, Senator Rand Paul, do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain of function research? Fauci responds, Dr. Barrick is not doing gain of function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it's being conducted in North Carolina, not China. So why were we not investigating North Carolina? Why are we putting all of our efforts onto the Wuhan laboratory? Why are we putting so much emphasis on China, but also not investigating North Carolina? But he revealed it there. Listen to this.
Do
they fund Dr. Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain of function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain of function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
You don't think inserting a bat virus spike protein?
So it's so deranged of a lie that even that's behind Rand Paul. That's his little helper there. He's even laughing. He's even laughing because of how deranged that is. No. Dr. Robert Barrick is using guidelines to do gain of function research, which, by the way, used to be criminal back in the day. Barack Obama almost made it illegal to do gain of function research, but then they pulled away. Why? Because big pharmaceuticals wrote him a big fat check. Then gain of function research was back in ordinance. But he's following the guidelines. He's following the guidelines of creating deadly pathogens in coordinates with the Pentagon. This guy is a complete, not only a serial liar, but a mass murderer. Anthony Fauci is a criminal. Bill Gates is a criminal. Dr. Collins is a criminal. These people are doing mass crime. They are mass murdering a population and defying against Americans, going against Canadians, going after everybody in this process. A global-wide mandate by the big pharmaceutical giants. And even kind of revealed a portion of the truth there by saying he's doing work in North Carolina. And they can't believe he said that. Listen.
Dr. Barrick,
we do not fund.
do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not do gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina.
You don't think inserting a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That is
You would
not
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports.
But he just admitted that Dr. Barrick was doing gain of function research in North Carolina. And then he turns around and says, no, we don't do gain of function. So he's deliberately lying to you. Deliberately lying to you on camera, under oath, in front of Congress for the entire nation. That the whole globe witnessed, the whole entire globe that was under lockdown, under mandates. This guy, who was the head responsible for it, is openly lying. This guy is a criminal. This guy is a criminal. Don't forget that. This guy is a criminal. And there's people still celebrating him. People are still celebrating this guy. Like it's some sort of vitriol. Oh, good for you for lying to us about masks. Good for you for lying to us about herd immunity and natural immunity and vitamins and ivermectin and lockdowns. And transmission, everything. They lied about every single aspect of this. There was no scientific analysis. There was no scientific proven evidence to back any of this. Because the only science that they were doing was creating gain-of-function superviruses to infect people with. Which used to be illegal. Used to be illegal until big pharmaceuticals stepped in, fired a big fat check to the government and just allowed it to happen. And that is why we get all these pathogens. So here, so you just saw Fauci admitting to it. You saw the former CDC director admitting to it. You saw Jeffery Sachs coming forward on this. Now there's this guy, Dr. Francis Boyle, a professor of international law. He says COVID was so developed at the University of North Carolina. Involved there at the UNC BSL-3 was Fort Detrick. The FDA was involved in the development of COVID-19, the offensive biological warfare weapon. So even a professor of international law could see this. Not that hard to figure out. It's not that hard to figure out. And people are saying, well, you're not a scientist, so you can't talk about COVID. It's not that hard to figure out, folks. Not that hard to figure out when you connect the dots, when you look up information, when you read into things, when you examine other scientists and compare data. It's almost like you're doing science yourself. But they told you not to do science. They told you not to examine. They told you not to read things and be scared shitless. That's what they told you. So here's Dr. Francis Boyle also coming forward that COVID came from North Carolina.
Later on, I pointed out that the COVID-19 was also developed at the University of North Carolina BSL-3 by Ralph Barrick, working with the Chinese bat queen from the Wuhan BSL-4 In addition, involved there at the UNC BSL-3 was Fort Detrick itself. Also, to get to your point on the vaccines, Colonel, the Food and Drug Administration was involved in the development of COVID-19, the offensive biological warfare weapon. And today, as we speak, Colonel, it has been the Food and Drug Administration that has approved all these COVID-19 vaccines. So,
And they did that by lying about the vaccine, lying about the science, and buying out the FDA so they could fast track warp speed and get an emergency grant to push these vaccines. Why would they do that? Because otherwise they would have to do testing, they would have to have critical analysis to back their vaccines, and they wouldn't be available for another 10 years, which is the normal pace for any pharmaceutical vaccination. But they lied to you. They lied to you. They deliberately manufactured lies, present to you right in your face, and manipulate you to fast track these experimental shots. To experiment on who? Experiment on you. And now you're seeing people with horrible adverse side effects, including paralyzation. People that suffered from the that I can tell you is very safe and effective. But people have suffered. And it's because they falsified an emergency. They used the Emergency Authorization Act to fast forward this, because otherwise pharmaceuticals wouldn't be able to get their vaccine out in time. And they would be able to make a huge amount of profit during this pandemic.
They helped develop the weapon, and now they are approving these so-called vaccines. As for the vaccines themselves, I'm not part of any anti-vax movement. I call them Frankenshots. To distinguish them, there are some legitimate vaccines out there, but I call these things Frankenshots. It was the Pentagon Defense Advanced Research Program Agency that envisioned and funded this mRNA technology that is behind all these Frankenshots. So they have us coming and going, Colonel. These mRNA, they give you particles of COVID-19 that get injected into your body. They are injecting into your body particles of an offensive biological warfare weapon with gain of function properties being injected into your body.
And that is the same technology that Dr. Robert Malone has stated numerous times, because he invented the technology, that these vaccines are questionable and needed more investigation. And what they do, they silenced him. They cut him out. They completely canceled him. The guy who invented the technology. They cancel out that doctor. They called him crazy. They called him cringe. They called him a conspiracy nut. The guy who invented the technology that brought you these vaccines.
And that is why.
So now you have a guy from international law. You have Anthony Fauci admitting to it. You have the former CDC director. You have Jeffery Sachs admitting to this. Again, it's not that hard to figure out. It's not that hard to figure out. And I know some people in chats, and some of my close friends are going to say, why do you keep bringing up COVID? Why do you keep bringing this up? We're in 2025. Why do you keep bringing this up? One, it was the most just absolute disaster of this decade. And probably the most elaborate, manufactured situation and lied in probably my entire lifetime, that took the entire globe hostage. Not just this country, but the entire globe. The entire population of Earth was abused through this. The second part of this, second part why I bring it up is because there's still people to this day, in 2025, that even with all this evidence, even after all that we went through, even after this being now presented more mainstream than ever before, there's still people that are going COVID cringe, if you will, that are still yelling at people for not masking up. There's still people that are discriminating each other because you're not vaxxed or unvaxxed. There's still people out there that are wearing masks inside their vehicles when they're all alone. And it's become a crutch to them. It's become a custom to them because they've been lied to. They've been propagandized. They've been brainwashed to be comforted by this. And it's just absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy and diabolical. That's why I call Anthony Fauci and all the people that contend to this criminals. Because they broke laws. They broke laws. They lied to you. They manufactured lies. They convinced the entire globe to lock down, shut down hundreds and thousands of local businesses, told you that you had to be laid off if you don't get this jab. People that were forced into this, people that we almost had concentration camps, for God's sakes, for the people that didn't get jabbed up. And now here we are in 2025, now learning about this information that we could have figured out beforehand to stop the spread of this virus. And we're finding out that it was purposely done as a bioweapon against us. And how people could still clap for Anthony Fauci and consider him a hero is beyond me. It is beyond me how people can congratulate him and still think of him as a good person, or Bill Gates, or any of these other insane, insidious people. Still consider them good people after all this. Just after this alone. Not to mention all the shit that they've done beforehand. And what's even more incriminating, I want to bring attention here, this is from Vesper, is, well, I appreciate the United States for at least attempting to go after Anthony Fauci and trying to at least expose details about him. I appreciate Rand Paul for having him on and questioning and doing the confessional there in Congress where he absolutely lied under oath. Nothing's being done here in Canada, which I find that frustrating. I find that kind of interesting. You notice how in the United States, they're at least attempting to hold people accountable. I know that they're not going to actually prosecute them. They're not going to be prosecuted. They're not going to be serving jail sentences. They're not going to have to pay a price for their consequences. None of that. Well, at least they're attempting. What have we done here? What have we done here? Because we're not holding Theresa Tam accountable, our health minister, that did the similar actions of Anthony Fauci. Why? Because they're both brought to you by big pharmaceuticals. They're both brought to you by the same company, the same cartel that has bought all the politicians, all the media pushing this garbage. So why isn't Theresa Tam being held to the same account as Anthony Fauci is in the United States? And considering that Theresa Tam, back in 2010, so 10 years before COVID, she was in a documentary proposing this idea of mandates, proposing lockdowns, proposing a pandemic situation to see if people were compliant or not. So here's a bit of this movie here showcasing her. And she was the health minister. She was a scientist then, but she was the health minister during COVID and did the exact same thing as Fauci, did even worse measures and mandates, which is why the Freedom Convoy existed, why truckers said enough was enough. By the way, truckers were the most vaccinated occupation in Canada. Did you know that? Did you know that? the truckers were the most vaccinated profession in this country. But they told you that there were anti-vaxxers. They told you that they were conspiracy nuts. They told you they were a fringe minority. Even though it brought a huge population of Canada together, more unified than any federal politician could ever do. So here's Theresa Tam back in 2010.
This is one of the worst case scenarios in terms of an infectious disease outbreak, in that their cooperation is sought. If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings. It's potential you could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine.
It's possible that we can track people, we can put bracelets on them, we can quarantine them, we can get police officers to drag them if they don't comply with government health officials. We can abuse our citizens if the timing is right. If we have some sort of implication, if some sort of emergency broke out, we can just abuse our citizens. Remember, during COVID, police officers were beating up people half to death for a virus. Beating up people half to death for a virus. Think of how insidious that is. Think of how gross that is. Think of how deranged for a human being to beat up another human being because there's a possibility you might be infected with a respiratory illness. Oh yeah, go ahead and beat up somebody. Make them bleed in the corner till they're almost dead because of a respiratory illness. How insane that is. And how insane that Theresa Tam said this in 2010, was involved in a laboratory in Winnipeg, also conducting gain-of-function medical science and research, creating the same pathogens, and doing the exact same thing during the COVID pandemic. No one's held her to account. Not a single politician has ever offered to hold her account. Not even Pierre Poilievre. There's another shortfall of him. Pierre Poilievre never told the House of Commons, hey, you got to hold your health minister accountable for all the heinous actions they've done during the pandemic to Canadians. Not a single politician. None of these people will be ever held to account for the actions they committed. But luckily, some silver lining, because I know how depressing this story could be now that the truth is being revealed. Here's some silver lining, though. Trump is signing an executive order to end federal funding for gain-of-function virus research, which many now believe caused the COVID pandemic. So the gain-of-function research that we know is dangerous, that we know used to be illegal before when Barack Obama was about to sign a similar order before big pharmaceuticals wrote him a big fat check. Now Donald Trump, after going through the pandemic, going through all this, now having RFK Jr. Being more informed about COVID than the rest of the administration, than the rest of the White House, is signing the executive order to basically ban gain-of-function research. That no one's allowed to fund super viruses that are contaminant and can easily spread to people as a bioweapon. So here's the signing process of this executive order, and listen to what Trump's one of Trump's advisors saying about this.
The first relates to gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade. What this executive order does, first of all, it provides powerful new tools to enforce the ban on federal funding for gain-of-function research abroad. It also strengthens other oversight mechanisms related to that issue and creates an overarching strategy to ensure that biomedical research in general is being conducted safely and in a way that ultimately protects human health more.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had. Right?
A lot of people say that, sir.
If we had this done earlier. Thank you.
So there you go. That's at least a step in a better direction. But like I said, the main people responsible, the people that deliberately lied to you, are never going to be held responsible. They're never going to have to right their wrongs. They're never going to be held to contempt. There's never going to be real justice. Having these insidious monsters, these heinous villains, running amok in charge of this. I mean, look at Anthony Fauci. He got a pardon for over a decade, over decades of work. Why would that be the case? Why would Anthony Fauci need a pardon that goes back to 2014? Why would that be the case? Oh, because Anthony Fauci, who was working with DARPA at the time, with the Pentagon, was also using super laboratories in Ukraine. Using biolaboratories in Ukraine at the time when they overthrew the Ukrainian government. So they're trying to completely wipe them clean of any criminal conduct, any international law they've violated, overthrowing Ukraine to use their laboratories to create these deadly pathogens. And people still want to give that guy credit. People still want to give that guy credit. As it's just insane. And that's why I keep bringing this to attention. Because this was the worst period going into the 2020s. It was the worst period for humanity. It affected a lot of people, affected a lot of businesses. People lost their livelihoods because of this pandemic. There's people that were falsely objectified into taking this experimental drug that was not properly tested, that they were lied to and then mandated to take it, saying how safe and effective it was, which is very safe and effective, being told to be it's safe and effective, and then getting huge amount of side effects afterwards. Worse than before. And they just walked away street clean. They walked away, not holding any of these people accountable. And there's no body within any country, within any resource, not even the UN, is going to hold these corrupted people accountable, because the corrupted people are overriding the UN. They're in charge of the WHO. They're in charge of the WEF. They're in charge of the international conglomeracies that are manipulating and controlling us every single day. So, unfortunately, they're still going to get away with this. But luckily, this is the one thing I can give Trump credit on in this administration, is at least taking the initiative to ban gain-of-function research funding, and at least it's a step in the right direction compared to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. That would just continue this. That would just continue this heinous action. They would have congratulated Anthony Fauci for creating even more toxic weapons to infect us with and cause another pandemic. So that's a silver lining to a disaster that still to this day needs to be held accounted.